Hi, Andy.
Hi there, Tony.
Thanks for agreeing to come on the Challenging University podcast. We've got a lovely day for it. Not that, people can tell if they're listening, but
It's good to have some sunshine at last.
yeah. Um, I'm trying to think how we were introduced. I think via LinkedIn and some mutual connections, one of whom has appeared on the podcast. But for the listeners today and the listeners to come, could you share your name and what it is that you do for a job?
Cool. Well, thank you for having me on. My name is Andy Crysell, and I have worked over the last, I guess, 30 years now, a bit over 30 years, across journalism, music and subculture journalism, into dot-coms, and then finally into agencies. And most recently, I created and grew an agency called Crowd DNA. Went from a team of three to a team of over 100 over 15 years, working in the cultural insight space, helping really big, exciting brands around the world to answer very big, exciting questions about the future and what it means for their brands as a whole, for their adverts, for their products, for their experiences. I sold that business about 3 years ago. I did what's known as the earn out thing, which is when you stay
Yeah.
on board when you've sold it for a period of time. Finally got to the end of that last year. I've now left the business other than a non-exec chair role, and I have a bunch of other interesting projects on the go. My sort of life after Crowd, which is a really interesting new challenge in itself.
Wow. Um, so quite a portfolio. Would you
I
say you've got a
guess so.
portfolio? Yeah.
Polio, yeah.
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 And thinking about the kind of work that you do today or have done and did with Crowd DNA, um, that might be something that's quite difficult to imagine when you're a young person to envisage what that would look like. So let's go back to when you were at secondary school. What were your sort of memories of that time and your interests and what you were studying?
Sure. My memories of that time, I mean, what I was into was music in a big, big way, and I was always gravitating to other people that are into music. I was also into football and a bit of the culture that's around football and where all these things sort of overlapped. So that was the sort of stuff I was into, and I guess fashion as well, and just some, I guess, kind of an interest in media and magazines and adverts, even though I didn't really have much sense of
Yeah.
how you made this stuff or who made them. I was just, I guess I was always drawn to all of that sort of stuff. Um, School, I guess it was okay on some levels. I definitely met some people there who are on my wavelength, people that also wanted to talk about music and all that subcultural stuff, but it wasn't really a good fit for me in lots of ways. I remember being quite an aggressive place actually. There was lots of factions, lots of fighting.
Yeah.
Um, if it wasn't fighting amongst groups within the school I was at had a particularly good reputation for fighting other schools. So there's a lot of that going on, which is probably quite indicative of secondary schools, comprehensive schools at that time.
Mm,
I do remember some good teachers, but I also remember quite a lot of general dysfunctionalism in the school,
mm.
um, underfunding. Pretty sure we didn't have a French teacher for about 2 years. So pretty sure we just didn't have one. They couldn't come up with one. Um, so I don't really have the happiest of memories of school. I do have childhood, but not the school element of it. I mean, I think I struggled to engage with the work. I think I always felt like my head was somewhere else. I think I don't know. I'm trying to work out how much of that was down to the school and how much it was down to me, regardless of the school I was in. But I probably put the blame at about 50-50.
Yeah.
Um, but ultimately, I don't really feel that my formal education can take a whole lot of credit for whatever success I may have achieved since then.
Mm,
So yeah, I did leave school as soon as I could leave school, really.
mhm. And did you sit your final exams? Were you GCSE, CSE? Where did you kind of sit in the
I was the last year of O levels. I was.
last year of O level? Yeah.
So I did mixture of CSEs and O levels. I actually had sort of left, really,
Hmm.
all
Yeah.
intent before then, but I did go back in,
Yeah.
did pass a couple of them.
Yeah.
I guess I could definitely put my mind to it, and up to a point and engage with various parts of school. But yeah, it was not something that really meant a lot to me, and I didn't really feel that there was a particular journey I wanted to stay on with education after that.
Mm. Which leads me kind of on to the next question, which is, what did you do afterwards? So you've gone in. Similarly, I went back in for my exams. I'd started working full time when I turned 16. Went back in for my exams. What did you do afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was all pretty messy to start with. Arguably, it's stayed pretty messy, but I think I was quite lucky as well. I was quite good at taking opportunities. I guess, even though there was disadvantages, I also am very aware of the fact that because I'm white, I'm male, I did come from London, that created some advantages for me.
Mm,
But I started out just kind of odd jobs really. I worked at DIY stores, I worked on building sites. My dad was in the building game.
yeah,
I pumped gas at a petrol station back when you literally people came out and pumped the gas.
yeah.
Um, the first job that was more like a proper job, and I got it from the job centre in I think it was in West One, was working as a runner, a foot messenger for a photographic company in Soho, and they're still there now. Uh,
Wow.
Loved it. It was such a great job. I think I was 16, 17 when I was doing it.
Yeah,
So I would deliver photos to ad agencies.
yeah,
Uh, I get to walk around Soho with my Walkman on, smoking my cigarettes, listening to hip hop, and going
yeah,
to all these very sort of curious, interesting buildings.
yeah,
Saatchi and Saatchi, Ogilvy. I generally wasn't going in through the front door, though. I was definitely going in through the delivery boy's door at the side. But
yeah,
it was quite interesting to see that world. Um, so that was fun. I enjoyed being in that environment.
yeah,
I'm not really sure where that was taking me. I suppose the big change really for me was this thing called sort of acid house, rave culture happened.
yeah.
As much as I loved music prior to that, it all felt a little bit distant. Not necessarily something I was going to be able to get close to myself. Acid house, suddenly it felt like all of this stuff was kind of on your doorstep in a way. If you didn't know the DJ or the promoter yourself, then one of your mates probably did, or one of their brothers or sisters did. So all of this stuff
Yeah.
suddenly felt in close proximity. And it really, really changed things for me. It kind of just felt like it just blew open the doors to stuff that you could do really. And it felt, I always talk about it as this sort of democratizing force. There were very few
Yeah.
experts. You could sort of become the expert in a way. Anyone could put themselves forward and be the person that was the linchpin in that kind of world. So I
And
started,
how, because there's a couple of questions. One is about when you were a runner
yeah.
for sort of photography, was given that you were interested in culture, loved adverts, media, did you seek out that, oh, it's delivering to Saatchi and Ogilvy? Did you know that they were the ad companies still
No,
are, helping?
no, I don't think
Okay.
I did. As much as I was into advertising, I don't think I was
Yeah.
at that point make any. I didn't have any knowledge of who made the adverts. As
Yeah.
much as I remember, I was just quite keen to get a job uptown rather than my
Okay.
woods. It was from the job centre. It
Ah,
didn't require any exams, as I remember it. It felt like it might be a bit of a laugh, and that was probably
yeah.
the criteria, I think, at the time.
Okay, cool. And then with the acid house scene, so and I kind of have exposure to that, enjoying the music and going to raves, but because we lived like, out in Basingstoke,
Hmm.
we weren't meeting necessarily promoters or DJs, or so how did you find your foot in that world? How did that work?
Yeah. I mean, I guess first of all, I suppose I just started going out to these parties
Yeah,
and quite a
yeah,
niche world, really, to begin with. It
yeah.
was quite small scale. Even though it felt like a lot of people you knew were in that world, it was actually
Mm,
ultimately quite small. And I guess you got talking with people and you got seeing what other people were doing, and it just felt like lots of people were doing things, whether it was they're designing some t-shirts or running some
yeah,
club nights or trying to set up a record store and a marketplace or doing
yeah,
some t-shirt designs, whatever it may be. And all these things suddenly felt a bit more possible. And from that, I started selling some tickets to some parties,
yeah,
because like the main person you go to buy tickets in a certain part of town.
yeah,
Um, Running a few small parties as well.
yeah,
Um, briefly I had a record deal with a mate. We didn't get beyond some test pressings.
Wow.
All of these things were sort of bubbling along, and I
Yeah.
started writing for some fanzines as well about dance music, about club
Yeah.
culture. Um, and that was the bit that stuck, really. That of
Yeah.
all the other bits, that was the bit that sort of stuck with me and took me off into what I suppose you could call a career as a music journalist. So yeah, I mean,
Mm.
I don't think, again, I didn't really understand the world of music journalism to start with. I just wanted to write about this thing called acid house and sort of be one
Yeah.
of the flying the flag for it.
Yeah.
But then as I got deeper into it, I guess I sort of understood more the ways of music journalism. I
Mm.
started to get work published in places like ID and
Yeah.
The Face and DJ Mag and Mixmag and then
Yeah.
NME, a bunch of other titles. And yeah, it was my job for about 10 years was as a freelance feature writer across the whole
Wow.
bunch.
And how how did that kind of work? How were you pitching that? I've met people who are, journalists that did the classic, you do a journalism degree. Um, how do you start to establish yourself as a freelance writer?
Yeah, I mean, I think sounds kind of obvious, but just do good work, really. I
Yeah.
mean, if you built some good pieces of work, it was sort of became easy to get other pieces. I remember it was really hard to get in the proper uh, magazine world at first. I had
Yeah.
fanzines, but then when I got a piece in ID, that was my
Yeah.
big breakthrough, really. I got a piece in ID. They asked me to write a DJ of the month slot. When I
Yeah.
had that, that was quite a credible thing to take out to other people.
Yeah.
I think I was always particularly industrious. I mean, you
Yeah.
literally start having £0 guaranteed at the beginning of each month. It was all
Yeah.
freelance. Um, so it made you industrious. It made you really big with ideas and putting them in front of people.
Mm.
I think I learned as quickly as I could just from reading other magazines about different styles of writing and tried to find my own style in all of that.
Yeah.
I did. I did. I think I can probably get away with it now. Sign on and claim housing benefit and all that stuff at the same time. Because as much as you assume you're going to make some great money out of it, when you start off doing it, I was literally making, sort of 30 quid a month. Wasn't really going to
Yeah.
pay for my South London bed sit and pay for food. So I was having to do other signing on type things as well.
Yeah. And it's striking that you say that, because I think probably of all, like, the guests that have come on the podcast, who've worked in the arts,
Yeah.
around about the same time as you, or worked
Yeah.
in creative industries, everyone has said that the way that like job seekers allowance and housing benefit and things like enterprise allowance schemes, the way that that was structured at the time enabled people to build a career in a way that you just couldn't do it now because you're so quickly
Right.
sanctioned.
Totally agree. Yeah,
Yeah.
it did create a bit of a safety net that wouldn't have been there for
Mm.
people like me otherwise. And okay, we were definitely bending the rules, but
Yeah.
I wouldn't have been able to do those things and probably wouldn't have been able to start agencies and employ people and so on. And it's
Mm.
interesting also, I mean, I think another thing back then, I wasn't part of it myself, but there was also that kind of London squat culture as well.
Yes.
Live in the
Yeah.
center of, people were literally living in Covent Garden at one point for
Yeah.
free, and the amount of fashion designers, magazine designers,
Mm.
bands, uh, videographers that emerged from that world. And again, they might not have been able to do anything like that if they weren't able to create those kind of communities in the center of town.
Yeah.
So
And where did you go then from you in ID, you're doing DJ of the month, you're getting more and more freelance work. Where does that take you to next?
I suppose you just try and write bigger pieces, really. So, I guess the ultimate goal is the cover story.
Yeah,
But you also just got to, when you're freelance, you just have to write quite a lot in a month. It's not a very well paid line of
yeah,
work. I didn't earn much money. I mean, the main things in a way that drew me to it, I think, was first of all being able to contribute to that world.
yeah,
Getting free records was an amazing thing. Getting in places for free, that was pretty cool. Getting
yeah,
flown around the world for free to meet interesting people, that was great. But the actual money in your bank was harder to come by. So you had to work really hard to kind of write as many things as you could across the month.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, then I just got to interview bigger and better known people, really. And even though I suppose dance music culture was still my main love, I branched out and wrote about everything from Madonna to um, lots of hip hop as well. So Nas and Jay-Z and Wu-Tang Clan, and yeah, just
Wow.
very fond memories of getting to meet really interesting, uh, creative people in all sorts of different environments.
And how did you uh maintain your cool or your professionalism, or if you're sitting down with like legends,
Hmm.
how do you do that then?
Yeah, quite hard. I mean, I guess you have to try and go in there as their equal, I think, to some
Yeah,
extent. You want to go in there as someone that isn't going to feel afraid to ask the questions.
yeah,
I think showing genuine interest in what they're about,
yeah,
being respectful of when you are moving into their world and their spaces as well.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I can't say they all went swimmingly. I can definitely had some slightly disastrous interviews along the way, but yeah, and I guess you learn as you go, really. There was
yeah.
no sort of formal mentoring process. I think that's something quite interesting. I think mentoring
Mm,
existed when I was growing up. I don't think it was actually a thing, but you would
no.
still maybe talk to other journalists, photographers you work with, and in a much more informal way, you'd probably pick up
Mm,
hints and ways of doing things, even if mentoring didn't exist in any kind of established fashion, as far as I could.
mm. Any memorable interviews that you could talk about?
Um, I mean, loads of them. I suppose everyone's always really interested in the fact I interviewed Wu-Tang Clan quite a few
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
I interviewed them all 3 times.
Wow.
Once in LA, once in New York, once in the Carolinas and Florida.
Yeah,
And I interviewed quite a few of them individually after that. I
yeah,
guess they're just sort of such an interesting bunch. They've almost become more mythical now than they were back then. Uh,
yeah,
Quite challenging interviewing approximately 15 people.
yeah,
Uh, so that was pretty noteworthy.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, all manner of them in different ways. Other extremes, I've had interviews where people have fallen asleep in them.
Right.
I've had interviews where the people have been quite aggressive and hard work. I've certainly had interviews where people have not taken too kindly to what I've said, but overall, it was an amazing experience. And I think I didn't only learn how to write from it. I think I learned a lot about culture. I learned a lot
Yeah,
about how to move in different communities and different spaces. I think I learned
yeah,
a lot about communication more broadly, not just in terms of writing articles, but what it means to share information about culture with other people.
yeah. And so this might be a big jump, so I'll be led by you. How do you go from, a career which is very much about your, individual efforts and the contribution you make in terms of your columns and your articles, to, as you say, employing other people,
Yeah.
founding
Mm.
agencies, organizations? How does that part of your kind of story stitch together?
Yeah, and it is, as you say, it's quite a big jump because in a way, when
Mm.
you are the freelancer, you can be the one man, one woman band. You could be the
Yeah,
maverick out there. That's very different than working with and collaborating with and leading teams.
yeah,
I suppose the joining point for me was when I left freelance journalism. It was about the time the first wave of .coms were
yeah,
happening,
yeah,
and I joined a .com called Ammo City, which was this amazing, fun, highly chaotic place where we were trying to bring sort of lifestyle journalism, subculture journalism online for the first time. We had a radio station there. I
right,
was editor, then editorial director there. So I had a team. That was the first
yeah,
time I had a team.
yeah,
It was all, as I say, rather chaotic. I'm not sure I was the greatest at leading that team, but we had a lot of fun. And I think we did have a vision for what we are trying to do. So that was
mm,
probably that was my first shift into thinking about what I did more in terms of it being more of a team effort rather than just me out
yeah,
there on my own. That .com went bust, like all of the
yeah,
.coms back then. I didn't feel like I wanted to go back the way I had been into journalism. I wanted to move into a different direction, and I had some exposure there
Yeah.
big brands. We were trying to do stuff with brands in
Yeah.
website, and that took me down the direction of brand work and agencies, and yeah, and
Yeah.
creating a couple of agencies.
What was it like working with brands? Did you ever have a challenge with them asking about your credentials? So thinking about the kind of university piece where it sounds like, when you're in a highly creative space and you're freelancing or, you setting up a .com, there isn't that question mark around where did you go to school or, what degree do you have? Did that ever come about when you were working with brands?
I think I remember it coming up in conversation occasionally. It never really had any impact on whether I was going to be able to do the work or not. Because
Yeah.
when I went on the brand side, I wasn't really employed by anyone else. I just went straight into, well,
Yeah.
first of all, co-launching an agency. So I was sort of the master of my own destiny to some extent there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do remember conversations where people would be talking about their university education and conversations I couldn't contribute to, and
Mm,
sometimes feeling a bit awkward about it. Maybe as the years went by, actually feeling quite confident in those situations and
mm,
quite happy to talk about the fact that I hadn't had that experience.
mm.
Um, but but no, I was never trying to get a job per se, and therefore it wasn't. People weren't looking
Yeah.
at CV and seeing that I hadn't been to university.
Yeah. And it's got you say, look, I've got Wu-Tang on speed dial. What are you can do about it?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, so what was agency life like?
Um, Very different, I suppose. I went in there much like journalism, knowing nothing about it. So my first agency, I teamed up with another guy who did have a marketing background. So he
Mhm.
taught me about things like, what a creds deck is and what an RFP is and what a timeline is. And I guess
Yeah.
what I brought to it was the, I guess the sort of the creative element, kind
Yeah.
of connections in the world of subculture. And we started this agency called Ramp, which was focused around creative communications, not
Mhm.
making adverts, but kind of long form stuff. So we made print media and
Yeah.
documentary films and websites,
Oh,
events, worked with people like Sony PlayStation, did a lot of stuff with
yeah.
them, grime culture and trying to integrate them into DIY music culture. A lot of stuff with Topshop back when they were still a
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
Uh, on the BMW, yeah, it was fun. I mean, we were
Mm,
definitely very much learning as we went, particularly in terms of growing out the team.
yeah.
But we did grow it, and eventually we sold it to St. Luke's, who are
Hmm.
fantastic ad agency, creative agency, who I then ran Ramp as a division of St. Luke's for a couple of years.
Right. Wow. And then where did you go from there?
Well, so after Ramp, which ran for about 8 years, including the 2 years I was at St. Luke's, I decided I did want to start another business.
Yeah.
I couldn't do anything on the creative comms side of things because of sort of
Yeah.
non type stuff. I'd always had an interest more in the insight and strategy side of things, and actually
Hmm.
never really seen them as discrete worlds. And I thought a lot of that really spoke to my experience in journalism as well. Different ways to find out what's going on in the world and to report that information. So I started Crowd DNA in
Yeah.
2008. There was me and two others to begin with, quickly joined by another person after that. And we, as I say, built the team up to I think about 105 people at the point I left.
Yeah.
And we were all about helping our clients to understand what's changing in culture, really. Brands are very fixated on their category, their customers, their competitors. And, we get that, but we were trying to get them to look more broadly across culture for where there might be opportunities and threats. And within that also to think of people as people, not just as customers. It feels rather derogatory and such a thin slice of what people are about. People aren't walking around being a customer, they're walking around being a human with all of
Yeah.
the concerns and passions and challenges that come with that. So yeah, trying to encourage them to think outside of those narrow worlds.
Mm.
Um, could be about fast culture, which is stuff around music and fashion and food and sport and
Yeah.
media. But sometimes it's around slow culture, stuff more around sort of family, spirituality, work, those themes that change at a different pace. Yeah, and we grew it up to have offices in a whole bunch of cities around the world. Incredible client base, so lots of work with Nike and Adidas and
Mm.
IKEA, lots of drinks brands and fashion brands. Yeah, it's a very fun journey. And trying to get to that, I think we'll probably talk about this in more detail, but get to that diversity of team. Yeah, we did need people with experience in doing insight work, but we wanted to try and diversify who we could bring into the business as well.
Yeah, well, talk about that a bit then, because it's really interesting to hear because, like you say, we may have experiences of working with brands or buying from brands or an idea we have about the conversations that happen in those offices around who we're going to sell to. Um, it'd be really interesting to hear, yeah, what you took to them and how the type of people you brought into your business kind of, I don't know, maybe gave them a different worldview, insights that they didn't expect to have.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly what we were aiming for. I mean, there are all manner of experts in the world, and sometimes I'm a little
Mm,
bit dubious of this idea of expertise, and I think it gets used against people, and it feels like a bit of a gatekeeping
mm,
technique. So we were definitely trying to level things out there and bring in perspectives from different angles. If you're in a line of work where we're helping our clients to move their brands on or create products or create experiences or create
mm,
adverts, if we can do that in a way that means that all of those things are reaching out to broader audiences, including those that are marginalized, those that are on the fringes, those that
mm,
don't necessarily have that aren't listened to, then that's such an important goal to aim for. And I think a really important, I guess, responsibility in the work we're doing. And how can we push our clients to think a bit differently? How can we sort of
mm.
test those barriers with them? Um, but it's not easy because as much as that's the ideal, you're also aware of some sort of fundamentals. I mean, I was the CEO and founder of a business that probably wouldn't have employed someone like me in a sense in the early
Mm,
days of Crowd. It was very much dominated by people from university backgrounds. I think at various points I was the only person in the company that hadn't been to university.
mm,
Um, so there was a lot that we needed to move on there. I remember from the beginning being really quite vocal about how we wanted to diversify who we brought into the industry. Um, but I think we probably didn't to begin with do enough to act on that. It's all very well saying that's what you want to do, but that doesn't mean that's in itself going to change anything. You can put those messages out on LinkedIn, but
mm.
you're not going to get to that diversity just through doing that. You're still
Yeah,
speaking to that same audience. It's actually quite a hidden line of work. It feels that you have to come from a certain background probably to even be aware that it's out there, let alone whether you can actually get a job in it. Um,
yeah,
so quite a lot that we needed to work at there. Um, and I think it's a very slow moving industry as a whole. So we were quite a small part of this bigger industry that moves very slowly. Um,
mm,
Even 3 or 4 years ago, it was pretty acceptable in the world of insight and strategy for agencies to talk about only wanting people from not just from universities, but from good universities,
yeah,
Redbrook universities, Russell Group. That was actually acceptable to put that in your job ad.
yeah,
I think that's gone away, but I still feel a bit suspicious of the intentions of some of the establishment in the industry. I don't know if that much has changed beneath the
yeah.
surface. Um, Sorry.
No, no, no. You just, I was waiting to sort of see what you might say next, and how, because I know, we both know about the work of like organizations like Common People that are aiming to open up the
Hmm.
industry. But as you say, you've got a very specific section then
Yeah.
around insight and strategy. So what do you think needs to happen, or what do you see happening that will help to change that?
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to look within your company. You have to try and take everyone in the company on that journey as well. And that can be challenging sometimes. I think there was a lot of willing within crowd, but definitely, you sometimes you might have senior team who quite focused on the fact they have PhDs. So,
Mm,
it might be a challenge for them to understand the position that other people are coming from. So it seemed really important to try and get everyone within the team on that journey. Um, and then I think you've just got to start partnering with interesting people. And that's I think the journey we were on really. We were partnering with like 10,000 Black Interns, with Apprentice
Hmm.
Nation. I think you have to go to those kind of people that are going to give you those sort of trusted partnerships to get you out to different communities, to different people. So yeah, I don't think you can just do it within the industry. I think you have to form those kind of connections.
Mm.
Um, so I think that's important. It feels like when I left Crowd, we'd made really good progress, but still so much more of the journey for them to be going on, and for the industry as a whole to be going on. Um, yeah, I think nothing that comes to mind actually is, as much as I don't have a university background and I want to broaden the industry out so that not everyone who is in the industry has to have a university background.
Mm.
I've always been, well, I have become increasingly mindful of not wanting to put scorn on anyone that does have a university
Mm.
background, because it is a major achievement for
Mm.
people. It does, anyway, and I fully understand that you might be the first in your family to have gone to university. You may have come from a low income background. So the last thing you need is someone like me kind of rubbishing that achievement. So you have to embrace that, as well as trying to create opportunities for those that didn't have that experience.
Yeah, no, I think you're quite right. And certainly with the podcast,
Mm.
uh, people have come on who did go to uni but run organizations that help people access early careers that may not be able to go, people that have done open university, degree
Yeah.
apprenticeships. Um, I'm always intrigued by how sometimes it can become hidden if someone didn't go to uni and goes on to achieve
Mm.
success, where people go, oh, you didn't. What a
Yeah.
surprise. And I thought it shouldn't be
No,
surprising. I guess we should just be able to take the route that suits us best.
I think so. Yeah, but like you say, it can still be the surprising part of someone's story being, comparatively successful. The fact that they didn't go to university, and perhaps it was never really an option for them. It was nothing that their family sort of strived for.
Yeah.
Does still become the surprising factor in this.
And so you're a dad, I'd say
Yeah,
that, yeah.
I am. I am.
Um, and thinking about your experiences, were your children to ask you for advice?
Hmm.
I don't like to assume, my kids don't like to ask me for advice
No,
really.
no.
Um, how have your experiences shaped what you would share with them when, they're thinking about their education and career journeys?
Yeah, I guess with them, and also in my efforts to mentor as well. Yeah, I mean, I've got two children. One who has gone to university. She's the first in our family to do so. My son hasn't gone to university, so we've got both sides of the spectrum there.
Yeah,
I mean, I do get asked quite a lot, what is your advice for people? And it's quite hard to answer that question sometimes. I mean, obviously saying things like, hang around in dodgy nightclubs and look for cool things to get involved with is maybe not the best plan. And you want to avoid saying those quite trite things like follow your dream, don't be.
yeah,
Um, I suppose things that have worked for me. I mean, I've definitely always had this insatiable appetite for information. I've
mhm,
always just gathered ridiculous amounts of information around topics. I think that's been
yeah,
really helpful for me. I've I think I've been quite good at joining the dots between things.
yeah,
I think that's a really important thing to try and do. Sort of join the dots between different things, whether it's cultural things, commercial things, in ways that other people might not so immediately be able to do.
yeah,
Um, I think practicing what you want to do, whether it's in your head, on
yeah,
paper, whether anyone else has given you permission to do it or not yet, I think that's a really important thing. Just kind of try and visualize it, really. That can be quite hard, but just try and visualize where you might want to go with this stuff. Doesn't mean you have every detail locked down, but
yeah,
some sort of path through it all. Um, I talked about that democratizing force for me, acid house. I think another one actually was the first sort of phase of .com, was another moment where there were no experts and you could sort of claim a bit of leadership. I think look out for those. I mean, I
yeah,
hope they're still there. It's a changing world, obviously, and I think there is a lot of gatekeeping going on these days, and some of the
mm,
platforms and communities that people might have found these opportunities in aren't there. But I still think you can look for those democratizing forces, those ways in, those sort of
yeah,
gaps into to different fields. Um, And mentors as well. As I say, I don't think mentors, I would never have dreamed of finding a mentor, wouldn't have known what that meant or where to look. But I
Mm,
think it's more accepted. I'm still not sure there's enough good, strong platforms or the right kind of platforms to do it through. But yeah, find those people that in some sort of fashion can give you the kind of information that's going to be helpful to you.
yeah. And you mentioned a couple of times there about mentoring and mentoring work. So are you part of a formal mentoring program?
I have been in the past. At the moment, I'm
Yeah,
not. I'm just doing it in a more informal way,
yeah,
which seems to be working quite well. So I have a number of people that I kind of mentor to various degrees of formality. Some are relatively formal, in as much as it's a set day per
yeah,
month, and we have
yeah.
kind of topics. Others are not quite like that, but
Mm,
yeah, I think it's really important to actually understand if you can be the right kind of mentor for these people. Um, it's definitely been a big learning curve for me, maybe because I didn't have a strong sort of back experience of education. I didn't necessarily come to it with clear ideas on how to be a mentor, but
mm,
um, yeah, you learn as you go. I think it's been really useful for me as well to become a mentor.
yeah.
So yeah, that's been fun.
And as a final point, I know, uh, there might be things that you can't yet reveal
Hmm.
because you're in an interesting phase in your career. What's next, or what do you think might be next for you?
Yeah, good question. It's been enjoyable. I mean, it's been weird having done something for 15 years, suddenly
Mm,
this wide open space. Um, It's mainly been the right kind of weird, a lot of fun, getting to meet lots of people, chat about different things.
yeah.
Quite busy. I think I maybe have some fear of fear of obsolescence, fear of redundancy. So I've jumped into a bunch of projects. I'm doing quite a lot of stuff with something called the Museum of Youth Culture, which is
Hmm.
exactly that. It's a museum about youth culture, which is funded by Arts Council, Lottery Fund, and various other
Yeah.
things. So I'm working with them more on the commercial side around what kind of opportunities we could create to take to broadcasters and brands here and in the US.
Yeah.
I'm working on some documentary ideas, got some of those in development.
Nice.
I've been involved in looking at a new model for a members club, one that's focused around the creative industries and how that in itself can be more accessible in format.
Yeah.
I've got a couple of print media projects on the go, one which is about me curating music and subculture journalism. The other one is actually something I'm writing. I have a publishing deal. So
Nice.
quite a lot of stuff on the go. And then in amongst all
Mm,
of that, the big question is, do I want to go for it with another business? And I could probably think
yeah.
of reasons why I shouldn't, but yeah, it's still quite something that draws you to it. I like creating things, whether it is documentaries or print media or companies. And I love shaping companies and the proposition and getting the team on board and that kind of.
Yeah.
So maybe another business.
Wow. So, and you answered a question I kind of had sat in my head, uh, just for the while that we've been talking about how do you maintain that creative spirit when you are, in business, running a business, but you're just creating all the time, whether it is like, yeah, an article, a documentary, a book, a
Yeah,
business. Yeah.
absolutely. And within Crowd, there were so many opportunities to create, whether it
Yeah.
was proposition, some of the things that we created, documentary films that we would create, or
Mm,
new office, and therefore thinking about what does Crowd mean in Asia or in the US.
mm.
So it felt like it was always a creative act as much as it was a commercial act, for sure.
Fantastic. And so I'll put a link in the show notes to where people can find
Hmm.
you on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
And the museum,
yeah.
is it can people visit it? Is it real or is it online?
It's a pop-up thing right now, but the funding
Yeah,
is there for them to open new homes in London next
yeah,
year and another one in Birmingham the year after that. So
brilliant.
yeah, it for now look out for pop-up versions, but as of next year it will have a permanent home as well.
Wow. Well, it's been really just interesting and I feel quite energized after speaking to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, thanks so
Uh,
much for coming on.
Thank you.